Hi, today I'll be talking about my circular queue from Leetcode. And I'm going to approach this solution a bit differently. Now, how do I know how many variables I have to declare? Well, I'll start by looking through these methods in the class and start to see which are the ones are the easiest to solve. So if we want to check if a queue is empty, well, basically, we need to get the current size of the queue. So I need a variable that checks the current size. Now, if I want to know if a queue is full, I can take that current size. So I can take that variable that checks the current size, and then I can compare it to the full length of the queue that has been initiated. In this case, it's k. So in this problem, they're going to tell us that the size of the queue that they want to be implemented is k. So compare the above variable to the size of the initiated queue. So just like that, I already know that I will need two variables. The first variable will be simply the size. So I can do, as I know that the self.size as of now is 0, and as I enqueue or dequeue, this size will change. So I've already done a method. Return self.size equal 0. So if self.size equals 0, this variable will become true, and therefore is empty is true. Tick. Now, what did I say here? I needed something to compare the above variable to the size of the queue. Well, okay, what is the size of the queue? Let's call that max size, and the size of the queue is simply k. Then we can come down here and say, hey, you know what? If the size equals the max size, okay, then it will return true. And just like that, I have finished two methods. So, and I got my two variables here. Now let's look at the enqueue. Enqueue is basically adding a variable to the queue, and we will solve this using an array. So what's the first thing we can check? Well, we want to check that it's not full. So if is full. So if the method down there tells us that this queue is full, then we simply return false because it's full. Similarly, we can do this to the dequeue. If it's empty, then I have nothing else to remove from the list. Then again, I can return false because in the question it says, I assume you read the question. The question says it returns true if it's able to do a method, or false otherwise. So we have now populated the next. I need a variable that gives me the value in the front, and I need another variable that gives me the value at the rear. So simply I can do self.front equals 0 and self.rear equal -1. Well, 0 is the front and -1 is at the end. And then these have to be pointing at some sort of array. So I can then create an array, call it self.array. And the size of that array will be 0 times k, and k is the number of items in the list. So if it's 10 items, then I'm just going to create a list with 10 items with the value of 0. So I would like you to give me the value in the front of the array. Well, the first thing you want to do, you want to check that it's not empty, because if it's empty, obviously I'm not able to give that array. So if it's not empty, and again, I'm going to call the other method I had here, then I want you to jump into that array and give me the value in the front. So in this case, if there has been no enqueue or dequeue and there's a value in there, so that will be 0. So self.front will be 0, and whatever array you'll have, in this case, you'll get 0. And the same thing, let's do this else -1. So basically, if it is actually empty, then just give me back -1. And here you would see it in the list, get the front item from the queue. If the queue is empty, return -1. Same thing with the rear. If the rear is not empty, then please give me the value at the rear. Else, return -1. And I forgot to return. As specified by the question here. So now I have solved 4 methods. Now let's see. So now in the in queue, if self is full, then return false. But what if it's not full? What if the in queue is not full? Well, basically, I will want to add this value to the queue, to the array. So what I can think of from these variables right here, well, the first thing that's going to happen, my size will increment by 1. Okay. And if it increments by 1, I also need to add the value. So in this case, the self.array some index, I'm just going to keep it here for now, will equal the value. So this value here will be added to the array, but where will I exactly add it? Well, I'm going to add it to the rear. Well, why not the front? Because if you imagine an array, they don't have a diagram here, but if you imagine this array or queue, the front will stay on the left side while the rear will keep on incrementing as we add values. So we will increment the rear by this value. But since the rear is -1, we cannot keep on changing this -1 as we increment. This rear value should also change every time we in-queue a value. So what will we change it with? Well, basically, we're gonna add it with 1. So this -1 here, we'll just add it by 1. In the first iteration, that will be 0, obviously, where the front and the rear will be the same. And we're gonna add this modular operator, which ensures that we are not overflowing more than the end. So what does that mean? If my max size is 10 and my rear is pointing at 9, and when it reaches 10, then that will be the end. So then you would want to add at the beginning of the queue. So let's say my max size is equal to 10. So let's just do it that way. And I have now reached the end, 10. Well, obviously your array goes from 0 to 9. So when it's at 10, it should add at the beginning. So in this case, it will give you 0. If the self rear is 11, then it will become 1. But as long as you're under the max size, then you would always get the exact location. This is the modulus operator in Python. And then you want to return true, as specified by the question. If this function is, return true. If the function executes correctly, then you would like to return true. Similarly, we're going to do the same thing in dequeue, but instead of changing the rear, you want to change the front. So again, off the top of my head, when I'm dequeuing, well, obviously the size is going to go down by 1, and wherever the self.front is pointing at, I'm going to increment it with 1, and I want to make sure that I'm not overflowing, so I'm going to do the same exact thing. Now, if I hit submit, I have a few errors. Let's see. Well, obviously, first thing, I have not returned true here. I clicked too early. And let me quickly scan. I see I have a spelling mistake here. And it's finished. And one can ask me, hey, when we're dequeuing, why is the front getting iterated by 1? Well, basically, because this is a queue, which follows the principle of first in, first out, the values that were added first have to be removed first. So when the pointer of the front iterates by 1, so in our case it goes from 0 to 1, then we have removed the first value that was added to the queue. Please hit like and subscribe to this channel. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comment section below. Thanks for watching.